represents $50,000. And what we're going to have you do is help us think about how you would spend that additional, $1 million, basically. Each dot, 50,000, you have 20 of them. However, there are a couple of rules in the game. And that is, in order to achieve the status quo budget, you have to spend, in other words, if you want the status quo budget, you need to spend 5 of those dots on that sheet. That's required. You also, in special education, because of increasing enrollment and because of the requirement that we hire additional teachers in special education, we could decide not to do that, but what ends up happening when you don't hire and provide the program here in North Reading is that those children will go out of district. And when they go out of district, you incur and you are responsible for paying, or we are responsible for paying the tuition costs, which range $35,000, $40,000 a year and up, plus the transportation. So I believe that in the reconstruction and in this needs budget, there's a need for 5 to support special education. However, absolutely 2 are required. And I will say that even if we don't get additional money, we will have to hire those 2 special education staff members at the expense of something else, which is what happened this year. We had to hire a position, and it was at the expense of the middle school librarian. Now, special education, and I know it has the potential to get into some pretty difficult conflicts between special education and regular education. And I will say to you, special education is part of regular education. It's part of everything that we do. We have a responsibility to be sure that each child gets the education that he or she needs. And I think it's hugely problematic to get into that tug. So of the 20 dots, 7 of them need to be spent right up front, which then leaves 13 others. We're going to spend all 13. But we would like to see, I would like to see, the school committee would like to see some level of input in terms of where you think the priorities are. And I will tell you from Monday morning to Monday night, there were differences. And I hope that through these kinds of forums in different settings, that the feedback that we get will be very helpful as the school committee moves forward into the budget season. So it's a small crowd today, but and I would encourage you to kind of talk together or do it alone or talk with us. But I'm curious to see how you respond as a group today. And then we'll talk about why you made choices that you did.
Basically, this is $1 million that we don't have. So this is $1 million above the funding that's available to us. So basically we're saying if we were to either somehow get more money, or if we have to go for an override and it's $1 million, where would you apply that? And as Dr. Troughton says, 7 have to go to status quo in special ed, and then the rest is
I kind of lost that a little bit, that the 7 have to go to the status quo.
Well, because with right now, Jeff, we're short of funds to even do next year what we're doing this year. So if we get that extra money, the first thing we want to do is restore what we have this year. But right now, we're short of funds, the available funds, we're short to even do next year what we're doing now. So in other words, if we get no more money, if the budget stays as it is, we'll have to cut somewhere between $250,000 and $400,000.
No school on Wednesdays.
Right.
Just to explain that, because I think there's some real misinformation that came out in that letter to the editor. We learned, the town learned last week that the governor has proposed a certain amount of aid to all cities and towns. You can go online, you can see what the governor is proposing. For North Reading, you know, and this is just not determined by a governor who says, well, I'll dole this out to North Reading and I'll give another community something else. It's formula driven. In fact, Carl and I were at a meeting this morning, again, where that formula is reviewed. It's based on a whole lot of factors, including enrollment. It's based on the ability to pay, and that's an economic factor that's determined by the general wealth of each community, and that's all rolled into Chapter 70. And so we were told that based on all of those factors, North Reading is going to get $600,000 more in Chapter 70 aid than what we predicted or what we projected. At the same time, the town is projected to get around $200,000 less in lottery aid. The town is going to absorb that loss. So we're getting an additional $600,000. So when you look at these two budgets and you see status quo and the available funds budget, you can see that there's a number, it says unidentified reductions of $885,000, all right? So last week we said, well, that's wonderful news, because instead of $885,000, it's now what? Well, you take 600 off it. Okay.
267.
Right. And so we were thrilled in a way. And that's where that 5 comes from, you see.
Right.
Okay, using we're doing a little rounding here, but each dot is 50,000, so 5 dots, just slightly, 250,000 hits that number and closes that gap. And so when we structured the forum, that's why we put 5 there. However, yesterday at our finance planning team, our Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee are now saying, let's readjust that thinking a little more, because the governor, that budget is not, that's the governor's budget. It's also predicated on a lot of assumptions that are built around these casinos. So I think it would be, I think we all agree that it's probably, even though it sounds good, you don't want to be counting on this money coming in. In fact, at our budget workshop on Monday, I probably I'm going to be recommending probably closer to $400,000 needed to close the gap, which would mean to reduce our status quo budget by $400,000, which would actually, if you're playing this game, you then have to spend 8 dots.
Yeah.
Okay, you see what I'm saying? How that works?
Just
Yes,
quickly, are those numbers mandatory numbers by the state? Is that,
Oh no,
No.
no. What do you mean?
No, for the status quo and the sped, okay, a total of 7. Are we below mandatory levels, or are we just below dollars and cents?
No, below the state, what does the state call it? The
The foundation.
foundation, no, we're not below the foundation. I don't think any communities are.
You can't be.
You
No.
can't be.
We're-
That's what I was wondering,
Right.
so that we,
Right.
okay.
No. The $600,000 of additional Chapter 70 money comes from that formula on Chapter 78, and it determines a set amount of money called the foundation budget, and it also then determines what's called net school spending. And each community has to meet foundation and also has to achieve out of the local, remember how Carl Nelson broke it down out of local contribution, which comes from your taxes and other fees that are generated in your community, and then there's the state. And so they're going, the state will say in this formula, North Reading, you must pay this amount of money. You must put this minimally toward education. And some communities, including North Reading, are not, having a hard time with that. And so there's an additional aid that it's called what is it, catch-up or?
Foundation aid,
Yeah, foundation aid that is saying, we'll give you, but you have 3 years to, and they keep on dropping it off, because otherwise, what would most communities do? If you didn't have any pressure, you just say, well, I'm not gonna do it, and the state, can't keep on throwing money towards you.
But if the casinos don't fly, we're not gonna see that additional Chapter 70 money, is that what I'm understanding?
I don't think you can draw that conclusion,
No.
but if the casinos don't fly, there's a lot of money from casino licensing and from new business. The government wants to close loopholes on business taxes. Neither of those has been approved by the legislature. So if those two things don't fly, what I've heard anywhere from, that's $500 million to $1 billion in projected revenues that won't be there.
Right.
So the budget is predicated on a pretty big percentage of phantom revenues, and that's part of our problem in trying to come to grips with, are we really gonna get this 600,000 extra, or are we not gonna get this 600,000 extra? Obviously, we all hope we do, but there's no way, it's
Want
shaky.
the money, but not the casinos.
Right, it's shaky every year, I'd say, but
Yeah.
this year it's even more uncertain because of the lack of solid revenues backing up the budget.
So it's almost like telling us you better vote for the casinos. 'cause-
Yes.
But yeah, well, I think
Exactly.
that's the reason that it's in there.
And the other thing with the foundation budget, if you study it the way we have to study it, is that it breaks it down and actually will determine, they'll actually calculate out for, you get so much money for so many children at elementary, middle, and high school, kindergarten, preschool. They will actually determine how many, a superintendent, how many administrators, principals you have, how many paraprofessionals you have. They put that all into the formula. So it's not as though each community is going around saying, well, we're going to structure our school system this way or that way. It's very much formula driven. So, you want to have at it and see how you
First time I voted.
Now, if you added more stickers,
I haven't voted in any
if we
of them.
put more in the
First
special
time I
ed,
voted.
special ed
Gotta
person,
put 5
would
here.
you increase the money?
Yeah.
Increase your, I don't know what.
Yes,
Yeah, I wanna
that's
keep
part of it.
Space, but, you could service them here, you could provide substantial programs for, stuff like that. Which might, save you a lot of money. Good, here, and if the parents.
Oh,
still-
the other thing I can ask you to do, if you have a pen, could you either circle your thoughts so we know that's one person, or cluster them all together so it's very obvious, or put them like in a row?
No.
Oh, yeah.
So like this one, who did, can I just stop for a minute? Is this someone, is this 5?
Yeah, that would have been.
It's 5. No, don't put your name on it, but we'll just do that.
So wrong.
I was surprised, I thought you.
I still think there's people that can't get by as religion.
Gonna help?
I can't believe I spent this money so fast.
Ha.
Unbelievable. How did I go through it like
I can't
this?
trust you. with my-
I've only got
Can't trust
$250,000
you
left.
with
It's like I've been on a mad shopping.
Well, thank you for helping us. We appreciate it. Carl.
And I'll vote for 2 literacy.
I need those literacy.
My kids can read those, these two teachers, Jeff's